Hi, everyone, and welcome to our next iteration of Sport Hiatus and Global VC Sports Office Hours. We have a tremendous panel today. It's a great lineup, our biggest group to date, and I'm really excited to hear what everyone has to say and to welcome this incredible group of established executives, athletes, investors, entrepreneurs, and so on. The reason we started this group, for those of you who are new, to Sport Hiatus or to Global VC Sports, is to super connect athletes, entrepreneurs, executives, every aspect of the sports business to sort of solve for what was going on in 2011, which was entrepreneurs in basements doing meetups and hackathons, investors at retreats and other environments, talking to other investors, and executives meeting at Joule events or at Sports Business Journal conferences or otherwise. And those three groups weren't speaking, but we thought if we could get these three groups to meet, Deepan Parikh and I were each in those areas, and a few other executives, and we thought if we can get these three groups to speak together better, might we be able to create a flywheel or drive more investment in sports, drive more entrepreneurship in sports, drive more ability for entrepreneurs to get into leagues, drive more athletes to be able to be a part of each of those environments. And that was the intent. So we've done about 100, expanded into San Francisco, Boston, where I am naturally from. I'm wearing my Red Sox hat in celebration of Gary, which we'll get to talk about quite a bit today. And I know that we've got a Bruins player or two here today and some Bostonians here in this conversation as well. So I just wanted to say thank you. We launched Sport Hiatus on March 12th, the day after the NBA suspended its season intelligently. And we're close to getting sports back on the ice, the pitch, the field, the court, and so on. So thanks everyone for being a part of this. There'll be questions, the ability to submit at the bottom of your screen. There will be polls and sentiment analysis on the right-hand side. Please partake, enjoy, engage. There's a global tip jar in the corner, which is how we fund some of what it is that we do. And with that, I'm really excited to hand this over to Anson. There is a Twitter handle at Sport Hiatus and at Global VC Sports. And you have on our site, each of the individuals on our panels, Twitter accounts as well. So please promote away and enjoy the conversation. And Anson, the show is yours. So thank you again, everyone, for being here and being a part of this.
Thanks, Jeff. As a former Boston Bruin, I don't want to comment too much on your hat because I'm supposed to stay neutral in my position as a former National Hockey League player. Now, currently, I'm an analyst with NBC Sports and MSG Networks. But today, I want to welcome our esteemed guests. I've got a great panel with us today, this afternoon. I'll start off with Kelsey Kolzer, first overall draft pick to NWHL, first Black player to be taken first overall in any professional men's or women's league, Isabel Cup champ, and also current coach for Acadia University, the first Black coach in NCAA history. We have Kim Davis, the EVP of Social Impact, Growth Initiatives, and Legislative Affairs of the National Hockey League. Kim's the highest ranking Black executive in the NHL, and she's doing a lot of really cool things for the league itself. We have Brian McBride, who was the first Black executive that was hired by the National Hockey League. He's a tech executive, and he also produced Willie, which is an outstanding documentary, who had the pleasure of traveling along with Brian and Lawrence around the country, around North America, talking about Willie, the first Black player of the National Hockey League. Current players, we have Blake Wheeler, first round draft pick of the Boston Bruins, I believe it was. And Blake is the captain of the Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg Jets are a perennial Stanley Cup champion contender. And Blake's done a tremendous job being very outspoken recently, and he's shown a lot of leadership, being an American playing in a Canadian market, which is very important. And last but not least, we have JT Brown, an NCAA champion with Minnesota Duluth. JT's played with over 365 games in the National Hockey League, and his voice is very, very important to this conversation. So having said that, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to start off with you, Kim, because Kim starts at the top and you represent the National Hockey League. You're doing a lot of really good things at the league level. What's the league doing currently to impact what we're seeing right now with making the game more inclusive?
Yeah, thanks, Anson. I'm happy to be part of this conversation. The way I typically describe what we're doing is to say that we're doing more of what we've been doing. I've been with the league now for 2.5 years, and we have really been on a trajectory of trying to make the sport more welcoming and really living up to the statement that hockey is for everyone, which for us is aspirational. And so about a year ago, we began looking at what kind of architecture did we need to put in place to make sure that when I and others who are championing these kinds of issues leave, that the work doesn't stop. And so recently we announced, and we will more formally announce, the creation of a number of councils and committees that allow us to bring voice to issues that I think we've been hearing about needing to make adjustments to across the league, whether it be a deeper understanding of the experiences that kids and families, particularly those of color and those from under-indexed groups, are experiencing our games in ways in which we need to make adjustments around that through our youth council, whether it be listening more intently to the voices of our players, particularly players of color and the experiences that they've had coming up through hockey, both in the United States and Canada, whether it be understanding how we need to appeal to the multicultural fan in a very different way, particularly given the demographic shifts that we're seeing across North America. And all of that is going to roll up to a set of recommendations that will go to the Executive Inclusion Council, which is going to be made up of owners, presidents, and general managers who have the responsibility to and the need to be accountable for the change that needs to happen across the league. So all of this is happening, I think, and is being accelerated by the times that we're in. But I think we're on a trajectory that has the commitment of the commissioner and every layer of the league. And I'm very hopeful and cautiously optimistic that we're on the right trajectory.
Well, I just had a little power outage there, so I had little technical difficulties. I apologize for that. But Blake, following up on what Kim just said, you're a current player in the National Hockey League, and I apologize. I said you're drafted by the Boston Bruins. You weren't. It's the Arizona Coyotes, but you did play for the Boston Bruins. So I was kind of right in that aspect. But being a current player and in this environment, you've been very outspoken with what happened with George Floyd. And I know current National Hockey League players is part of the culture of not really saying too much. Why do you think it was important for your voice to be heard?
It felt like it was time. I think having it happen in my hometown definitely added to it. I think even going back to, the divisiveness of what Donald Trump was saying about Colin Kaepernick a number of years ago, for me, that was kind of a turning point in my sentiment with everything. Seeing the president step in and try to take away some of, our basic rights and freedoms as Americans. He's Colin Kaepernick's trying to promote change and doing it in a peaceful way. And for me, that triggered something in me. And then going forward, having the things that have happened, everything that's transpired in the last few months, during this pandemic that we're in, I sat with it for a few days, and I just kind of was steaming about it. My wife and I, every day we'd wake up and we just felt it just felt wrong. Things just didn't feel right. I think it was something that we both just needed to get out and kind of have it be known that, this is where I stand on this. And I don't think this has anything to do with politics. This has nothing to do with which side of the political spectrum you fall on. I mean, these are basic human rights. And if you can't get on board with that, then, I have no time for you. So I wanted to get that out there and kind of have it be known where I stand on it. And, going forward, help try to be an ally and help out with as many, conversations like this as I can.
Well, JT, I want to ask you a quick question. With Blake stepping up as being an ally, like he mentioned, and you were the first person to protest what's happening in society by raising your fist there in Tampa Bay. Were there any repercussions that you felt that you occurred and felt after that happened?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that I would have felt was Twitter and the social media backlash for, I mean, kind of like what Blake said, nothing political. I mean, for me, it was more right and wrong, bringing attention to police brutality. And, obviously after seeing what Kaepernick and other guys in the NFL had went through, that was sort of expected. From the team standpoint, I let my team know, the ownership and staff, that I was going to do it prior. So it wasn't a shock to them. I think, they all respected the right to do it. And, I worked really, really hard with Jeff Vinnick afterwards to, come up with ways that, I can make, tangible change, in the Tampa Bay area.
Do people understand, or do people in Tampa Bay know your background and your history and relationship with the law enforcement industry, with your family?
I mean, I guess probably not. I would just assume, I think from my standpoint, being able to talk to, my dad, being able to talk to other people, whether it was military or police officers, before I made my decision, that kind of helped a little bit, push me in the right direction.
Okay. And Kelsey, what's been the mood in the women's game? I mean, we've heard the stories about the men and what's happened, how they've been impacted by these racial situations, playing in a sport that really hasn't been as inclusive as people would like it to be in the past. What has been your experience growing up playing the sport of hockey?
Yeah, I think in the women's game, it's an interesting dynamic because I think there is kind of already this level of mutual respect in the fact that, we're girls playing a boy sport. So, I think there's a level of recognition of what you had to initially go through to even make it where we have made it, to play at a high level being a woman in, a male dominated sport. And so I think that a lot of times that leads, again, to that kind of level of respect. And, I can honestly say I never faced a single racial slur playing women's hockey. Everything that I've experienced has been, when I was playing against guys. And so I think that, it was just another aspect for them to try to alienate me within the game when I was, playing against the guys. I think that has kind of then, in the last couple of months has really blended into, I think just a more easily acceptable ability to speak out. I think that that's something that, you see Kendall Coyne, I think it was really big of her to be able to stand up and say, I was wrong about the whole Colin Kaepernick situation. And you see there's plenty of other female players that are speaking out and, kind of gathering behind, the African-American female athletes that they've just kind of really gotten to know alongside as they've been playing. So, I think that it's a unique dynamic, but I think that there's a lot of power behind the female voice right now as well.
And Bryant, you're hearing everyone's messages so far. You produce Willie, the great documentary about the first Black player of the National Hockey League. But why is that film so relevant today?
Well, first I got to say, great in-game adjustment on the video HC. That was very solid. Very, very, very adept.
Thank you. That's what happens when you have to stay at home. You have to do this stuff on the fly. I don't have our usual techs to help me out.
Great recovery. Great recovery. Better than some of your in-game adjustments, I must say.
That's for sure.
But no, in all seriousness, I think the film has taken on an even deeper resonance. In the last 6 weeks, we built the film, we made the film, Laurence and Ebion and Rosella and a really small, mighty team, with the intent of putting forth a scalable piece of content that would make it possible for people to discuss these issues in a very direct and forthright way. And who could have foreseen, right, the whole world being on its head 6 months ago? But it is, and as a result, I'm so pleased that we made it regardless. That said, in this environment, I think that its importance is heightened. Where we've come from now after George Floyd, and I tip my hat to everyone on this panel. They've all been outspoken. And Blake, I know that's not simple in your role. And so, big hat tip to you. But where we've been now is we're almost, not quite, I think it's going to linger for a while, out of the anger phase. You know, it was just so hard to watch that, and it just made people so viscerally angry to see it, right? And you know, 9.5 minutes is a long time, no matter what you're doing, and that really obviously struck a chord, you know, all over the world. So when that anger phase, and there's been so many personal stories that have been shared, you know, you meet anyone of color and they've got their own personal stories of personal racism, of the impacts of systemic racism, and beyond. So those personal stories are really important. It's been important that people listen. It's important that people share. But then what do you do? Where does it go from here, right? And where it goes from here, I think, in my estimation, is that's where the work starts. And this is hard. This is hard work. Kim likes to say, you know, get used to or get ready for uncomfortable conversations. And that's not once, that's all the time, right? And what I'm most interested in is that work being done and ensuring that people have the fortitude and the will to carry it through when it gets harder, right? The pursuit of happiness in this country really should be about the pursuit of comfort. Everybody wants to be comfortable, and it's hard to make change to a system that has been, and it's a strong word, but it's been built with insidious intent. This was on purpose. You know, if you go back to the 13th Amendment, if you go to the Homestead Act, there is a history, a long history that has been built to oppress, and that's just the fact. It's not emotion, it's fact. And to undo that, it's going to take the same intent, the same willpower, the same fortitude that was used to make it in the crack, instill it in the cracks and crevices of everything that we do every day. So it's a Herculean task, and the film was just the beginning. It was one small step in trying to shine light into an area that's hard to talk about, especially amongst young people. So we're doing some very specific things to get the film to educators and to young people so that these conversations can at least begin.
Well, how do you intend to use the film to make a difference? Like, give me some examples that you guys would use using the film as like that platform to create change.
There's some specific things. We've been lucky to find distribution through some great partners like ESPN and NBC Sports. A week from today, the film will debut. It'll be a long-time home on the new Netflix competitor Peacock that's being put forth by NBC and Comcast. So it will be on Peacock on the free tier and on the pay tier. And you know, we're working closely with a number of partners, Kim and her team, to get a curriculum that we've built specifically, that's been built with us, a curriculum that is very detailed, and it is very useful in asking the hard questions. We've built a social justice film that is disguised as a sports film so that people will consume it, right? And then from that, the mountains that Willie climbed, you know, over so many years and just never gave up. His approach to life and the lessons that can be drawn from that are in that curriculum. That curriculum is being made available digitally for free. So we say, here, teachers, this is for you, and any educator, whether it's a teacher or whether it's a mom or dad at the dinner table. Here's some questions and some things that you can talk about your young people with your young people, regardless of what color anyone is, and you can shed light on this area. And then because we're putting it on Peacock, one of the places on Peacock is the free tier. It'll be available on any device for any young person to watch without charge. It's going to have commercials, but it will be free. So it's a tool that we hope to get. We're working closely to get it into 12,000 schools over the next few years. And to Kim's point on accountability, you know, we welcome that accountability. You know, rather than just the personal stories and complaining and being upset about the state of the world, we're doing our damnedest to do something about it, and we're going to continue to.
Well, Kim, Brian just touched on something about accountability. I want to ask you, like, how will the NHL measure success?
Yeah, we've been spending a lot of time thinking about that, and I don't have every answer, but I do know that we are going to have to put metrics in place for every single aspect across the entire ecosystem of what we want to see. And when we talk about the actions that are required, as Brian says, there's been a time of listening, and we continue to need to be good listeners and learners, but it really is about going from this moment to a movement and keeping the energy alive and high, even when our game resumes, not losing focus with the facts that we have things that we have to change. And that change starts at the very top of the organization. What do we look like in the front office? What does our coaching staff look like, our officials, all the way down through the hockey ecosystem? Because we know that representation counts, right? And kids are going to be inspired to be the future Blake or JT by seeing others that look like themselves, and not just as players, but to see them in executive positions and to see them on the ice as officials. And so the metrics that we need to put in place really need to say over the next 3 to 5 years, what do we need to look like? And how do we measure that? So for example, if right now we have 9% of our players that are players of color, but only 3% of our fandom represents that population. Both of those are low bars, but at least we ought to be on par with those low bars. So I think, you have to start by understanding the data. Just like Brian said, you have to understand history. That's important to know where you're going. We also have to understand our data. Where are we starting so that we know where we need to go? And we're going through all that analysis now and bringing some transparency around all of that. We, as an example, as a league, have never participated in the sport and the report card that all the other leagues participate in that shows what their demographic profiles are. Next year, for the first time, we will participate in that. And we finally convinced leadership, again, to not be embarrassed by where we are, but to put a stake in the ground and say, if this is where we are, this is where we need to go. And we have to start by putting a spotlight on that. So I think that's the way we'll be thinking about it.
So is that the focus, starting it at the league level first and then have the teams follow suit? Because one of my big issues from back in the day was the teams had all the power and it wasn't centralized from the NHL in the front office. Like,
Yeah.
You guys see that changing now with the message you're trying to put out there? You start the league first and then you disperse it through the respective teams?
Yeah, and sort of my conversation with Gary has been, we need to make sure that we can demonstrate as a league the leadership that we're asking the clubs to demonstrate. But we've already started having conversations with the clubs about their demographics, and we are putting everyone on alert that that's what we want to do across the NHL. This is not just going to be league driven, and we don't have time to cascade this down in a sequential manner. We need to be doing this concurrently at the league level and at the club level as well.
And Blake, as a current player, I'd like to come to yourself and JT from your point of view as current players. As a white player, is it difficult for you to navigate this terrain with what's happening in the world today, in the locker room and outside the locker room?
I think at the beginning, it was a little bit uncomfortable because it's kind of the first time, you know what I mean? I think for anyone, it's the first time you do something, or the first time, you have to speak a certain way, or you find yourself wanting to say the right thing. You don't want to offend anyone. You don't want to stumble over your words or trip on yourself. But I think as you do it and as you think about it and as you kind of absorb the information you're getting, you stop caring. You stop caring what other people think. What really matters is where you stand on it. And listen, there's going to be, I would hope most people are kind of on board with it. Not everyone's going to be. And, even the other day, my wife and I, we were looking at my Twitter mentions, which is obviously the worst thing in the world to do. And I never do it. But there was some of the stuff that was being said was just like, I find myself wanting to respond, but I'm like, why would I even justify that? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, people have me in a Donald Trump Make America Great Again hat. I'm like, come on. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I would say initially some of those things are difficult. And then you kind of look around, you're saying, well, that's not me. That's not what I want to look like. This is what I stand for. This is what I believe in. And you know, when it comes to the locker room, not everyone's going to agree on every single thing, and I don't think that you should. I think that's the great part about being American and about America, is that we all get the right to believe what we believe in and express those views. But like I said before, fundamentally, like if you can't get on board with just having everyone be treated the same way and, you know, look at people the same way regardless of their skin color or any other differences they may have with you, then there will be a problem. But you know, I don't anticipate having huge locker room discussions on it. If something arises and we need to, then yeah, we'll talk about it. But you know, I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to have to hammer out every day. I think most of the guys are pretty well on board with what's going on.
And I could, you know, I relate to what you're saying, because I don't read my mentions either, because I just want to punch people in their face. I don't advocate violence, but I just know sometimes you see things on Twitter that people won't say to your face. They'll say to you, you know, they have Twitter fingers out. So yeah, my best advice to you would be, don't read those mentions. It's not worth your while. But as a captain of the team, I feel like your voice is different than, say, a third or fourth line player. Do you take that into heart too, with the fact that you're speaking out, knowing that you're the captain, you're the face of the organization there in Winnipeg?
Well, there is responsibility that comes with it. So I think that, you know, to my earlier point, you know, it is important that, you know, you're not making this political. You're not making this a, you know, conservative, liberal, any of that sort of stuff. Like, you know, this is about people, human beings, and that's been, you know, for me, where there's no wiggle room. You know, there's no swaying on this issue, and that's why I've had no problem kind of being adamant with my position on it. You know, within our team, like I said, you know, I'm totally for having different political or even social viewpoints on certain topics, but you know, if we're going to have a conversation on this issue, you know, I'm going to be pretty firm with where I stand, and you know, if you're not agreeing with me, then we're going to have a long conversation about it. You know, in terms of what I'm saying publicly, you know, like I said, I think it's important to really direct your energy and your focus on the things that matter right now, and that has nothing to do with politics.
Nice. And JT, I'd love to hear your perspective, being from Minnesota and everything that's happened recently with George Floyd. You grew up there, you played minor hockey there, you played for the Wild too. What was your experience like as a Black hockey player growing up in Minnesota and playing professionally there also?
Oh, I mean, I think the bigger and the more issues arise in the youth and minor hockey associations. I think looking back, you know, it happened more often than not. You know, I almost went into games knowing that something was going to be said. And I think that's part of the problem as well. But I think moving as I, you know, continued to progress into higher levels of hockey, the number of times that something would occur has also gone down. So I don't know. I mean, I think whether that's kids just saying, you know, trying to hurt feelings, I think it also comes with, you know, when people get older, they have a little bit better understanding. And I think the worst part, I guess, when you get older in the NHL is more so the fans, like Blake said, just your mentions. And it doesn't even have to be, you know, playing some or saying something, speaking out. I'd say if you have a bad game or you make a bad play, you can go on Twitter after and mention, and race is brought into a bad play, which I don't know, like that's not necessary at any point. Like if you want to chirp me for a bad play, I guess that's fine. But there's other ways, you know, that they're going about it in a nasty way.
Yeah.
And I know you have to leave here shortly. You've got to go and get your testing done at 1 p.m. Central Time. I have one final question for you, JT. If you're Commissioner Bettman, what would you do to change the game of hockey?
I mean, you know, I've thought about this a little bit before, and I think Kim touched on a lot of topics that I think would be good. I mean, I'm not in the conversations. I don't know what is exactly going on a day-to-day, but I think, like Kim said, representation, you know, from a management standpoint all the way down to team coaches. I mean, there's definitely qualified people for these positions. And I think, you know, finding that so that there is representation and more diversity in the league, as well as publicizing it and letting people know what teams, how many people of color are being hired by, each team. I think those are great ideas and ways that we can advance the game. But I'd say even on a smaller scale, I would just say that continue to empower your players to speak out. And I think by doing that, I think a lot of people underestimate how much influence a player has on the youth, whether that's, the up and coming junior player that's, getting ready to make their way into the NHL, or even just the young fans that idolize us. And I think the league stepping up and, actually wanting players and empowering them to use their voice is a huge step. And that will trickle down to the youngest levels of hockey, where, especially for myself, where I experienced the most amount of racism in hockey.
Do you think what you did when you protested during those games, do you think that's been held against you?
I mean, I like to think not. I mean, I think, again, I know the position I was in, like you said, fourth line player, kind of in and out of the lineup already. And I think, for myself, that, it crossed your mind whether or not, it would be held against me. And I think at the end of the day, that wasn't the most important thing. I had played hockey. I made it to the highest level. Obviously you want to keep playing and you want that to be your legacy as well, but also wanted to leave a legacy, for my kids, of something that they could look up to, and knowing that I did the right thing. So regardless of whatever the outcome could have been, which obviously you think about, situations like Kaepernick, I was ready for whatever would have come, or if, something were to happen.
I mean, that was a brave moment. I mean, I saw you do that and I was like, wow. I was like, he's got some major stones. I definitely supported you at the time. Hindsight being 2020, you're being put in that situation again. Would you do it all over again?
100%. No, there's no doubt in my mind. And it kind of goes back to, Blake said it, I've said it, when you see the Twitter mentions, you see the way people talk, especially on an issue that's, it's right or wrong. It's not left or right. It's just a human rights issue. So when you see those comments, it assures me that what I was doing and what, others had done before me trying to bring attention to this was the right thing to do.
Nice. Well said. Well said. Well, Kelsey, we heard JT talk about representation. You're coaching college hockey right now. Gen Z, Generation Z, whatever you want to call them, are the biggest drivers in this change right now. They're huge, playing huge roles in things changing going forward on social media and also in the streets. How are these athletes different than, say, the players that you played with growing up?
Yeah, I think what's amazing is just how open they are. Their whole lives, social media has been a huge driving factor. Everyone can see everything that everyone is doing. And I think that has allowed them to be just more open. They've seen a lot in just, what I'm coaching kids that are 03s, 04s, 05s, different things like that. And, it is amazing just how confrontational they can be without a care in the world. And I think it's a very good thing, because this is really, it's what it takes. They're not allowing what their relatives, what their parents say to 100% create what they think. And that's something that I think is really powerful. They're willing to have open and honest conversations and then move on from it, which is something that is necessary, especially within, the issue of racism. You need to be able to confront your teammates, teach them a lesson, educate yourselves, and then move forward. The next day, let's move forward. We've learned, we've grown. We can't hold it against each other for making each other aware of a situation that was unacceptable. So I think that it's something that, you always say social media can be kind of a double-edged sword, but in this case, I think it has helped a lot, because they are just so much, they've been exposed to so much. Their lives have been on display the whole time. So they are just kind of unashamedly open with a lot of things. And I think it has opened their minds to harder conversations as well.
And as a coach, what's your take on your players speaking out? We've seen John Tortorella. He's since changed his position when he said a player, if he's going to kneel during the anthem, he's going to stay on the bench. There's no protesting allowed. My players have to be lockstep into what's happening with the team. And then now he's changed his tune, rightfully so. Coach Tortorella has seen the light. But what's your take as a coach? And if your players want to say something potentially controversial, how do you approach that player? Like, take us inside the locker room, and what kind of conversations are you having with said player?
Yeah, I think what's amazing about being a coach is the power that you have to kind of influence their minds. That's what I think there's a lot of room for improvement within coaching, and, you know, having these harder conversations, and being trained to have these harder conversations, but making sure that every single day you're creating an open space where people can bring issues, discuss, whether you're coming to a group decision or whether as a whole team, or whether there's a group that is going to, do something, and then just have the rest of the team, at the minimum, you have to support. If you are not going to be one that's going to kneel for the national anthem, I understand that, but you need to respect and support your teammates that do feel this way. I think that that's something that is, just being willing to speak and learn and grow and teach. That's something that you really, it's one of the most important aspects of being a coach. And, I'm excited to have the opportunity. Even before I was, vocal on social media, I had to think a lot about, or it was running through my mind a lot about what is my statement, how is my statement going to impact my job and my ability to recruit, and will I offend people? And it took a little bit of time for me to even come to the conclusion myself and sit down with myself and look at myself in the mirror and say, if I'm offending those people and they are so against what I have to say, then they're not the people that I want in my program. And so that's something that, it's kind of, for me, it's step one, is making sure you have the right people, and then creating that environment where they can be open and have honest conversations.
Recently had Blake Bolden get hired as the first Black female scout for the LA Kings. Do you have any aspiration? Do you dream at night ever thinking about coaching the National Hockey League?
It is interesting. I think, as I'm in coaching longer, it's something that, can definitely, I like to not kind of get ahead of myself. I like to kind of be in the moment. I haven't even, our program starts in the 21-22 season, so I haven't even gotten a chance to coach a full season yet. But it's something that, you see these opportunities open up, and it's exciting that I even have the possibility to dream about that. And that, people younger than me have the possibility to dream about being an NCAA coach, or a scout in the NHL, or a coach in the NHL. You've seen it a lot more with women getting these positions in all other sports, but, Blake took that to the next level. And that's something that, nobody else will ever be able to, kind of take away from her. And it's doors that she's opened up for so many people. So I'm very grateful that I even have the opportunity to have that dream. We'll see where time takes me, but.
Well, as a parent now, I've become really good at reading people's faces without them saying any words. And I could tell when I first asked that question, that smile that was on your face without you saying anything, that there told me that, yes, it's in the back of your mind. Your words might not have said it, but that to me said, yes, for sure, absolutely, you're thinking about that in the future.
Fingers crossed, we'll see.
So, Bryant, I want to get back to you about the Willie movie. What would be the biggest takeaway for someone that hasn't watched the film? If they're going to watch the film, would you say that they'd walk away thinking after seeing the movie?
I think that the film has so many brilliant threads that run through it. It touches on Canadian American relationships. It touches on Kelsey's in the film, and other young people are in the film, but a lot of the focus is on Willie. So, and his friends who are in their 70s and 80s. So it's got this generational gap that's in there as well. It talks about Willie's roots and where he's from, and talks about immigration. Willie's great-great-grandfather escaping from slavery. That's immigration, right? That's as hard as it gets. And just the gumption that Paris O'Ree had in his belly, it was directly delivered down to Willie to fortify him to go through what he had to go through, on a very, in an uncharted, very difficult path. So I think though that, so there's lots in there. There's a lot packed in. Laurence did a brilliant job of weaving all those threads together in the film. So there's a lot to take in, but I think the primary story is Willie's. and his fortitude and just what he had to endure. You've been there, AC, and you've been there, JT and Kelsey and Blake. Getting to the top level of the game is really, really hard. And Kim, you too, as an executive, it's very hard to climb that ladder. And then when you've got impediments along the way based solely on race, it can be really disheartening. I've felt it, in my time in the sports business world, at times, where there's just systemic stuff that's there, but it's really, I think, the story of Willie's ability to navigate and figure it out without losing his soul, without losing his purpose, without losing his energy and excitement and love for what he was doing is the takeaway. And similar to, one thing I want to pick up on, one thing that Kelsey said, and try and tie something together. Now she's going to pull together a team of young women who all have a common goal, and that's to win, right? And the work that was referenced earlier, now it's time for the work to combat this on a daily basis. It's no different than the way, she's going to build her team, the way that Blake and JT have been part of teams, and Kim builds her team. It is the transparency, and all these things have been said, but I want to tie it together. It's the transparency of hard decisions. Kelsey's going to pull 2 or 3, 4 players aside, 10 players aside, and say, listen, in some point in training camp, you're not going to make the start. You're not going to start the season with us. You're going to go down to the JV. You're not competing for 200 feet. You showed up out of shape for camp, and just honest assessment as to that has to be had. And everybody expects it as part of the process. That's step 1. Step 2 of the work is measurable. Do you win or lose, right? That's why they keep standings. Are we winning or losing? Where do we stand, right? Metrics, to Kim's point. And the third of accountability is, if we're not winning, if we're not doing what we're supposed to do, why is that? Do we have to change the lineup? Do we need to shift how we train? Do we need to eat differently? What do we have to do? So those 3 things in every team and every organization that already exists, we're already doing it. Right? The film is just an indicator of things that are already happening in the world. We're just asking for mind share, and we're asking for prioritization that systemic, blatant and systemic racism be thought about along those lines. And if the film does that and plants those seeds, then hopefully we've made a little bit of a difference.
Well said. Well said. At this point, I want to respond to a few questions that were submitted to us. I want to ask Blake and JT, how are you feeling about the upcoming season, and what's most top of the mind as the season approaches to keep everyone safe?
I'm uncomfortable. I'll be honest with you. Like, I was in our facility here in Winnipeg for the first time the last 2 days. It's a different world. We're living in a different world, and I think even looking at the return to play protocols, everything that the league and the teams individually are trying to do to keep the players safe, I don't know what else you could really ask for. There's the amount of testing we're doing, the amount of procedures that are in place to try to keep us all safe are, above and beyond. So from that standpoint, you feel good, but I was just in Florida, 2 weeks ago, and it's crazy how fast things change, how fast this virus moves. So I would be lying if I said I was completely comfortable and on board with everything. I think, personally, I have 3 kids and a wife at home, and that's my priority first and foremost. And I don't know, even if we go to this bubble and we're all 100% clean and we make it all the way to the finals, that I'll ever be completely comfortable with everything else going on in the world. But, I guess we have a job to do, and you kind of just take it day by day and just be responsible as you can. I think as a team, we just got to look out for one another and just try to do the best we can to make sure everyone's safe.
I'd echo a lot of the same concerns Blake just had. but then I look at the other side as well. This has been a very long break for, for us to stop when we did. And I think a lot of guys are excited to get back on the ice. I mean, I would say even just quarantine for, I can't even, it was maybe 80 something days, I think, before. Yeah, it was a long time. And I think, just the idea of, possibly being able to play again, sparks a little bit of excitement, I guess. But at the same time, just like Blake said, there's a lot of steps that need to be, worked out, and making sure that, all the players are putting that as a priority if we want the season to, one, begin and make it all the way through the finals.
The fact that you the number of days is saying something.
Well, I mean, you got a 3-year-old, a 1.5-year-old. I think, remember the first day kind of coming back and, working out again. Not that I don't like talking with my wife and the kids. It was nice to have another person and, see another person face to face and have a conversation with them, some of the hockey guys. So, from that standpoint, it was nice again, like you said, but there's a lot of unknown in this situation.
You were just talking wife and kids. I was going to cut you off before you got yourself into trouble.
No.
Jumping right away. But I was asked another question for you, JT, about just getting a little bit deeper into law enforcement being in your family, and kind of like what role that's played, and have you had any kind of brushback because of that?
I mean, well, I'll start off. My dad wasn't a police officer, but he worked in juvenile probation. Worked with police officers all the time, going back and forth. So, I mean, he got to see a lot of stuff on a day-to-day basis, whether, police brutality, from that standpoint. But at the other end, my wife's stepdad is also, he's a cop. Although it's in Canada, he feels the same way. So being able to talk and see his opinion of what's going on in the United States and how much, it puts a negative light on just on police officers in general. And then after protesting in Tampa, I was able to become friends with the police chief and, just sit down and actually have candid conversations with him and tell him what I was feeling and why, this was such a big, important deal to me. And again, echoed the same sentiment that, he hates seeing this and that it makes all of them look bad. And his job or his goal is to get rid of this as well. So, I think just being able to have those conversations with the police officers, considering that is, that's exactly what I was bringing attention to, was police brutality. So being able to confront them and say exactly what was on my mind, not sugarcoating it, and actually have a candid conversation.
No, that's very true. And even, the misconception is it's a lot better in Canada than here. That's wrong. Like, the racial injustice occurs in Canada as well as it does here. I think it's more in your face here in the US, but it still occurs there in Canada also.
100%.
But Kim and Kelsey, I've got a question for you guys. In the sports world where you both reside, can you guys both share what it's like being a Black woman in hockey as an executive and as a former player, now as a coach, just as a way to enlighten and to inspire other potentially young Black girls that want to get into the business of hockey?
Sure, I'll start. I quote, grew up career-wise in a industry that also had very few women and fewer women of color, and that was investment banking. So I wasn't a stranger to being one of the few. During my 20 plus years in investment banking, I tried to use my voice and the positions of power that I had to bring attention to the different experiences that women of color have. Again, pointing to the data. And I think that's such an important way to ground people in taking action, is to understand, the data doesn't lie. If you look at, as an example, the experiences that women have with being on corporate boards, and it's about 19, almost 20% of women on corporate boards. But when you look at women of color, it drops to 3%. So there's something about the intersection of race, ethnicity, and gender that does make a difference. And again, that common thread is race and ethnicity. So, my job in the NHL, I see it as to be a facilitator, and to be a leader and to push the envelope. to help Gary understand the issues, to understand the data, and to make this a more welcoming and equitable environment for everyone. As everyone has said, what we're seeking here is fairness across the board. And everyone should have the opportunity to do whatever their skill sets and their interest brings for them. There should be no limitation, whether it's a limitation because of your sexual orientation or gender. People should be free to pursue whatever their interest is. And that's my hope for the league.
Okay.
From the, players and then coach standpoint, there's a lot that you would have to endure. I think it's, and a lot of it is the smaller, more nuanced things. It's the kind of odd looks that you get when you tell people that you play hockey and they ask you, oh, you play field hockey, and you say, no, I play ice hockey. It's the looks first that, you get when you say, I play women's college hockey, because people for some reason can't fathom that women can play college hockey. They assume you play on the boys team. So there's a lot of things first, being a woman that you're going to have to endure within the sport, although it has gotten better. And then there's a lot of things being a Black woman that you're going to have to endure within the sport. There's certainly were days, especially in college, and then, kind of early on in my pro career, where there were times where sometimes I just wanted to be a hockey player. I didn't necessarily want all of the spotlight on the fact that I was a Black female hockey player. But there was a moment that it just kind of clicked that I need to really take advantage of, kind of my position and who I am and my ability to, kind of just endure and push through and be a model for other people. And I think it's something that, it's now, I think I do believe that it's now becoming more of a norm to see more women, in executive positions and in high level positions. And then especially, we're working on getting more women of color. So, I think that there's a lot of hope, and you really have to kind of hang your hat on the pride and the good days that you're going to have, and, really be able to just kind of push through the bad ones.
Well, I need to shout out all college hockey. I'm a former Michigan State Spartan. Yourself played at Princeton, Blake at Minnesota, and you have JT at Minnesota Duluth. So I'm always going to be a huge advocate for college hockey, and seeing more diversity across the board in college hockey is a big thing for me too. The last question before I hand it over to Jeff would be to Brian. And Brian, the question I want to ask you is, what do you see as the biggest thing to look out for in the new normal?
I think it's a great question. And I think the everyone on the screen has been presented opportunities, and they've taken advantage of those opportunities. Okay. And impediments that arise in that process are what I'm really after. That I want to identify those things that stop, the JT Brown of the future when he's 7 years old and he's called the N-word on the ice. That's happening thousands of times a month right now. Okay. In minor hockey, if not more. That has to stop, right? Like, that has to stop now. Zero tolerance on that. Any impediment that gets in the way of the most important currency, and that the most important currency we have, not just in hockey, but anywhere, is opportunity, right? And anything that impedes opportunity, that makes it harder for people to achieve, that makes that path unequal, that is the root cause. We have to eradicate that. And some of that, again, is systemic. There've been, I early in my career, I was told I was articulate and I dress well. And I was like, really? My Harvard degree doesn't mean anything? I guess not. But, and by the way, I was at Trinity College playing hockey too, by the way. So,
Boy, my bad.
Guys, but I was there. So those things that get in the way are really the enemy. I read a statistic last week that I'm embarrassed that I didn't know. And the statistic is, in my business, the percent of investment capital that goes to Black-owned businesses in this country, in the United States, it's 1%. I had a better chance of making the NHL than doing what I do now. and everyone who's seen me play is laughing, hysterically. So
That's
it's,
what I'm talking about.
I mean, that blew me away, it really did. I should have known that. I've been at this for a long time, and, that's an impediment. When VCs and others, use pattern matching, what they're really saying is, I want to invest in people like me, who are the same color as me or the same educational background as me, right? And they don't widen their aperture for the brilliant idea that some kid has that just would never cross their path. I'll finish on there's a brilliant man named Raphael Bostic. Raphael Bostic is the only Black Federal Reserve judge in the United States out of Atlanta. He oversees the Southeastern region. And he wrote a piece recently, right after George Floyd, about the lost opportunity by not educating people of color, by not providing opportunity, by oppressing and keeping people pushed down. It is billions and billions of dollars per year that could be flowing into this economy, that could be flowing into this country and helping pull people up out of situations that are incredibly difficult, that again have been built with in insidious intent. So I encourage everyone to read that piece by Raphael Bostic. Do the work. Read The Warmth of Other Suns. Read Just Mercy. Read The New Jim Crow, and read The Color of Law. If as Black people, if we don't know those lessons, then we're perpetuating a trope and a stereotype of not doing the work. Everybody's got to do the work.
Before we finish off here, as Brian gave that shout out to Trinity, I'd be remiss if being here in Atlanta, Georgia, I didn't give Kim Spellman a shout out too. So I think we've got everyone's colleges covered. At this time, I want to thank everyone for joining us. It was a great conversation as usual. Great to see everyone's faces. Thank you for Jeff for getting the whole crew together to have this conversation as we continue to start up the game of hockey once again in August. Hopefully everyone's got their fingers crossed. But on that note, thanks everyone. Appreciate everyone taking the time, and I think we'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks.
So first of all, thank you everyone, to Brian, to Anson, to Kim, JT, Blake, Kelsey, to the guys at Live Like putting on the sentiment analysis and polls, to the army of people that are helping put together tweeting, graphics. It takes a big group to make all this happen. So first of all, thank you to everyone. This conversation was amazing. I think it was powerful. I think it's meaningful. I think it's topical. We are in a crazy time between the coronavirus. I just got a notification while I was sitting here watching that we've hit 3 million cases in our country. We're in a time where Black Lives Matter, and that message needs to be pushed out. We're in a time when we have Willie coming out in a week, which I can't wait to watch. Brian has not given me an advanced copy, so I'll be watching it with everyone else. Anson, you get the MVP award for going from iPad to iPhone to iPad. I don't know what you did, but you battled back, and that was amazing. On the fly, live, you get the real-time MVP award. We haven't issued an MVP award yet, so you're the first MVP award on Sports Office Hours. To everyone watching, I think we had 1,100 people live at one point, which is an amazing audience on a Wednesday afternoon in the summer when they could be outside caring about an important issue that really matters to us individually and to such a wider audience. I love hearing the word hockey as a Bostonian. Some people call it other things. For me, it's hockey. So thank you for a couple of you that said it that way. But I want to end with one message that has been our tagline from the day that we started Sport Hiatus, and I think it's really topical for this conversation, which is our goal is to support our leagues, our teams, our athletes, our broadcasters, publishers, brands, agencies, partners, entrepreneurs, and investors. We are truly one team. Sports never stop. Fans never stop. We're stronger together. So be creative and be safe. And with that, thank you guys very much. Really appreciate your time. And we'll be back in 2 weeks on July 22nd with a panel on an exciting topic that's coming up. But this was absolutely tremendous, and I really appreciate everyone's candor and honesty. So be safe, and we'll see you everyone soon.